My father stared right at me and stated, "We used your saved money for somebody better." He did not look away, he was simply sharing the fact. He assumed I lacked the nerve to challenge him. The dining room became heavy with tension. The quiet noise of Julian's utensils, Mom's forced cough, the faint electric buzz of the lamp. For a moment, I couldn't distinguish the sound of my own pulse from the silence. I finally spoke. "Who is better than me?" That's when Grandpa slowly got up. His expression turned severe, the kind of look that signals an impending explosion. He demanded they name that person immediately. But the core problem had not begun at that dinner, nor did it conclude there. My name is Kelly. I thought minimizing conflict meant keeping quiet for most of my life. I was raised in an environment where silence maintained calm, while noise invited problems. I quickly learned to be inconspicuous and occupy minimal space. I was the child who prepared her own meals and walked to school alone, understanding I shouldn't ask for things because my younger brother, Julian, always required more. Everyone frequently praised Julian's potential, treating it like an inherent trait the rest of us should support. Mom and Dad fueled this idea with everything they owned: attention, cash, approval, and pride. By the time we were teenagers, the favoring was blatant. It was a definite system, and I was expected to accept its logic. I recall birthdays where Julian received electronics, new clothes, and bicycles. My gifts were comments like, "You're sensible, sweetie. You don't need much," alongside a slice of cake tasting of duty. I also remember school recognition nights. If I earned a minor award, for attendance or a science ribbon, Mom offered polite applause. Dad would invariably whisper that Julian's eventual success would be far greater. I accepted their words completely. I started working part-time after school at 16. First, an office filing role, later a weekend job at a coffee shop. I made sure to save every cent. The total grew slowly but reliably, becoming a solid foundation I could count on. Dad offered to help me deposit it into a secure account for my future. I relied on his help. I truly believed families protected each other's hard work. When I reached 23, working full-time as a junior administrator in the city, that savings account represented my financial security. It wasn't for anything extravagant. It meant stable rent or maybe a reliable used car, proof that I could sustain myself. I made a real effort to build that life. I leased a tiny apartment downtown. The walls were thin, and the view was just a parking garage. However, it was truly mine. I decorated it with second-hand pictures, attempted to keep a plant alive on the sill, and learned the noise of the street below. My life was modest, yet it was secure. I still drove home to my parents' house every other weekend. I convinced myself I was doing my duty, but honestly it was for Grandpa. He traveled from out of state often and always timed his visits for when I was there. He never stated that he saw the family imbalance directly. Still, his questions were always sharp in the right context. He'd ask, "Are you doing okay, kid, or are they treating you fairly?" I always replied, "Yes." I did not realize then that he already had suspicions. I hadn't even let myself consider the possibility. I didn't recognize the first sign of trouble right away. It was a Wednesday evening following work. The city felt tired, and the train smelled of rain mixed with metal. I entered my apartment, removed my shoes, heated up dinner, and logged in to check my bank balance as I always did monthly. The resulting number was illogical. I stared, hit refresh, confirmed the internet connection, and refreshed once more. The amount was not simply reduced. It was almost depleted. For several moments, I remained motionless. The fork stopped midair. That familiar, quiet instinct surfaced: avoid immediate panic. Don't assume the worst outcome. But then I viewed the recent transaction history. Transfers, payments, and withdrawals I never approved. Not just a couple. A long series of transactions. They were done quietly and spaced out. Someone clearly hoped I wouldn't examine the account too closely. Someone who knew I rarely complained about anything. The next day, when I was at my parents' house, I tried to act normally. Mom was humming while dicing vegetables. Julian was stretched out on the sofa, a sleek, new laptop shining on his lap. It was clearly expensive. It wasn't the sort of equipment he typically owned unless someone had invested heavily. "That's a nice computer," I commented cautiously. He didn't even look up. Yeah, Dad thought I needed something decent for the classes. My throat felt tight. Classes, you're enrolled in programs now. Yes, some extra courses, new supplies, all the gear, they called it an investment. He shrugged, typing as if he were entitled to it. You know how it is. I did know entirely too well. Mom slid the chopped carrots into a pot. Kelly, be supportive. This is an important phase for him. Do you remember what you were like at that age? I worked after school, I replied softly. She dismissed the idea with a wave. That was your preference, and you turned out perfectly fine. It wasn't the actual words that broke my composure, but the underlying tone, the certainty that I would simply accept everything again. Later that evening, after Mom went upstairs and Julian disappeared to play video games, Dad walked into the kitchen. He opened a utility drawer, searched around, and then slammed it shut carelessly. I watched him, searching his face for something familiar. Dad, I started, can we discuss my savings account? He didn't react. What about it? There is money missing, a significant amount. Still, no flicker of surprise. We utilized it. My breath hitched. Used it for what? For your brother, he stated matter-of-factly. He requires opportunities, chances you didn't need. I stared at him. I didn't need opportunities. You are already employed, he countered. You are financially stable. You're set. Julian's future requires more support right now. The way he spoke, so detached and rational, like explaining a routine process, caused a profound shift inside me. My entire life, I had exerted myself to avoid being a burden. Now he was telling me that this very fact made me undeserving. I cannot recall my exact response. Perhaps I said nothing. Silence was the only defense I had left. But later that night, while they were all asleep, I checked the drawer Dad had been rummaging through earlier. Tucked beneath a pile of old takeout flyers was a thin folder. A folder bearing my name. Inside were documents, paperwork detailing the initial steps to secure a small loan under my identity. My hand trembled, but no longer from fear. Something harder had replaced it. This wasn't an oversight. This was a deliberate scheme. And it was the exact moment I ceased being afraid. I barely slept. I lay awake in my small apartment, listening to the heating unit cycle on and off, mentally reviewing every detail. The empty account, Julian's new machine, Dad's calm admission, the loan documents hidden in that drawer with my name clearly visible. By morning, I felt fundamentally different. The fear was still present, but its character had changed. It was no longer paralyzing. It was sharp and directed. I drove to work mechanically. The city scenery passed in muted colors while my thoughts solidified into a strategy. During my lunch break, I met my friend Sky at the cafe near my office. She looked at me and immediately frowned. You look like you haven't blinked in 12 hours. I recounted everything to her, speaking quietly and carefully like unwrapping an old wound. Her eyes widened immediately. Kelly, that isn't just messed up, that is criminal. I know, I whispered. But they think I won't pursue this, are they right? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence confirmed the answer for both of us. Not anymore. When work ended, I drove directly to Grandpa's residence. When work finished, I drove directly to Grandpa's residence. He lived in a quiet neighborhood on the city limits, characterized by mature trees and front porches that always creaked slightly. Before I could fully knock, he opened the door, his eyes immediately narrowing at my expression. What happened? He asked. We sat in his living room. The air smelled of old paper and wood. I explained everything, the missing funds, Dad's justification, and the loan documents. He listened intently without interrupting. His jaw grew tighter with every new detail. Finally, he let out a slow breath. I was aware they favored Julian, but this... He shook his head. This is exploiting you, Kelly. They are banking on you keeping quiet, just as you always have. I can't ignore this, I said. No, he agreed firmly. You cannot. We spent the next 60 minutes reviewing the financial records I had brought, the printed statements, the specific dates, the transfers, and the withdrawals. Grandpa moved slower than he used to, but his mind remained sharp. You must formally document all of this. Every transfer, every missing dollar. Keep copies somewhere secure. I've already started, I told him. He offered a small, approving nod. Good. As I collected the documents, he placed a hand on my arm. A family that genuinely cares for you does not treat you like a resource. They don't deplete your resources and then ask you to smile about it. You do not deserve this behavior. His words affected me more deeply than expected. I had dedicated my entire life to avoiding being a burden. I never imagined my own parents would turn me into a financial source. Driving back that night, the city lights appeared different. They seemed less like stars and more like deliberate signals. I sat at my kitchen table and spread out all the evidence, the statements, the itemized payments, the bills, and the folder with my name. I arranged everything into a neat, quiet stack, not for an immediate fight. Instead, I prepared for the moment Dad would least expect the confrontation. And I knew exactly when that moment would be. My parents traditionally hosted mandatory family dinners whenever Grandpa visited. They claimed it made the home feel welcoming, but it always felt like a performance, a show of the family dynamic we had stopped living years ago. When Grandpa confirmed he would be visiting that weekend, Mom promptly organized the gathering. She asked me to come early. I declined. I arrived precisely on time, the crucial folder concealed inside my bag, my heart maintaining a steady rhythm unlike the chaos of the preceding weeks. The moment I entered the living area, I sensed the instability. Mom was moving too fast, unnecessarily adjusting napkins and plates. Julian was slumped in a corner, scrolling on his phone, trying to become invisible. Dad, ever composed, stood near the kitchen entrance, hands in his pockets, his face impossible to read. Grandpa was seated at the dining table, his cane resting beside him, his eyes unusually focused. When he met my gaze, the tension in my chest eased. Dinner began ordinarily, too ordinarily. Low conversation, the sound of cutlery, the smell of cooked chicken mixed with Mom's usual citrus cleaner. But the atmosphere was fragile, ready to snap. Dad carved his portion of food and briefly looked at me. "I heard work is keeping you busy." "Yes," I confirmed. "It's been productive." "We are proud of your independence," Mom interjected. "Not many people your age achieve that stability." I nearly laughed aloud. The irony was suffocatingly bitter. Then Dad delivered the statement abruptly and without warning. "We spent your savings on someone better." The room immediately plunged into oppressive silence. It didn't ring, it simply pressed down on us. I felt Grandpa's slow, heavy attention move from me to Dad. Julian froze mid-chew. Mom quickly placed her fork down. The metal clattered against the porcelain. I swallowed once. "Better than me?" Dad still didn't flinch. "Your brother needed support, you did not, it's that simple." Simple. That word should never be used to rationalize a betrayal. I held his gaze. "That money belonged to me, every dollar I earned it." "You will manage," he responded, waving his hand dismissively as if shooing a pest. "You are responsible, strong, no one needs to guide you further." Grandpa forcefully pushed back his chair, a sudden abrasive sound that silenced everything. He stood slowly, his presence dominating the space. "Name that someone," he commanded, his voice deep and steady. "Now." Dad began to speak, but the sound was panic masked as annoyance. "Dad, this is not your concern. We managed things as we saw fit." "That much is perfectly obvious," Grandpa stated. "Too obvious." His gaze shifted to me. I reached into my tote and removed the folder. My hands were perfectly steady this time. Every page felt like a fixed certainty, not a hardship. "I brought something," I announced. Dad's jaw clenched hard. "Kelly." I placed the papers on the table. Statements, detailed withdrawals, payment receipts, all the dates aligned like a completed mission. The final sheet, the loan application documents, rested on top. Mom gasped sharply. "Where did you get those papers?" "They were in your utility drawer," I responded calmly. "The one you thought I'd never check." Julian leaned closer, confusion evident on his face. "Wait, this money came from her account." Dad snapped defensively. "You needed those college programs. Don't start acting ungrateful." "I never asked you to steal her money," Julian shot back. It was the first genuine crack in his voice. "Why would you even do that?" "Because you deserved the investment," Dad retorted sharply. "Kelly doesn't require expensive resources. She doesn't need the same opportunities. She takes care of herself. She always has." Grandpa slammed his open palm onto the table, not violently, but with sufficient force to achieve total silence immediately. "That fact," he stated, his voice like ice, does not make her less worthy, it makes her exploited. Dad's face turned red. Dad, you don't understand the situation. Oh, I understand completely, Grandpa said. You took her savings without authorization. You attempted to open a loan in her name. You risked her entire future, so you could continue pretending Julian is helpless. Mom whispered weakly, we were trying to support him. At her expense, Grandpa challenged, turning his full attention back to me. Kelly, speak your mind clearly. What solution do you expect now? It was the first time anyone in that house had ever genuinely asked me what I wanted. I took a slow, deep breath. I demand my savings be returned, every single dollar, and I want the loan application paperwork shredded by your hands, not mine. Dad began shaking his head instantly. You are dramatically overreacting. You have a steady job. You can replace the funds. Grandpa cut him off sharply. She will not replace what you appropriated. You will, both of you. Dad's expression immediately shifted, moving from anger to palpable fear. Mom's voice trembled slightly. We honestly don't possess that amount right now. Then you will adapt, Grandpa interrupted without mercy. Sell something, decrease spending. You must solve this. Because if Kelly files this as a financial abuse report, the legal consequences will be severe for you. A long, heavy, and inescapable silence followed this warning. Finally, Julian spoke up, his voice barely audible. Kelly, I am genuinely sorry. I had no idea about this. It didn't resolve the situation, but the fact that he offered the apology carried significance. Dad slowly collapsed into his chair, looking utterly defeated. Fine, he forced out through tightly clenched teeth. We will pay it back, all of it. And the loan application, I pressed. He swallowed hard. I will shred it tonight. Grandpa gave a single, firm nod, signaling his satisfaction. Good. Perhaps this family still has a small possibility of recovery. But I viewed the situation differently. Certain damages are permanent. The situation simply established a clear boundary, a line I would never allow them to cross again. I stood up and retrieved my folder. I am going home now. Nobody tried to prevent me from leaving. For the first time in my life, walking away felt completely different from fleeing. It felt like purposefully stepping into the life I had finally chosen for myself. The next few weeks passed quietly, almost strangely, like the calm that follows a major storm. My parents repaid the money through small, tense installments, larger than they ever expected to justify. Each electronic transfer arrived without any accompanying text, no apology, and no acknowledgement. Just numbers shifting accounts, revering a betrayal they should never have executed. Grandpa maintained frequent contact. Sometimes he called, sometimes he visited my apartment with groceries I didn't truly require but accepted anyway. He never offered lectures or pressure. He simply ensured I knew I was not navigating the aftermath alone. Julian initially kept his distance. Then, one afternoon, he appeared at my front door, his hands jammed deep into his pockets. He made no attempt to rationalize anything. He simply stated, I'm genuinely trying to improve. And for the first time, I actually believed him. Life inside my apartment felt lighter now. I organized my documents, created a new financial plan, and took concrete steps toward the future I thought I had lost. The fear was gone. The confrontation at that dinner did not repair my family unit. It did not erase years of silence, but it provided me with something entirely new, a clear boundary they were finally forced to respect. I still visit my parents occasionally, but the dynamic is altered, and perhaps that's how it should be. A boundary is not a barrier. It is a line that defines where you end and others begin. For the first time in my life, they finally stopped violating mine. I am building a future on my own terms now. It is one they cannot rewrite or borrow from. And if you have ever needed to stand up to the people who were supposed to protect you, I want you to know this. You are not wrong for demanding respect. You are not isolated. If this account resonates with you, please share your perspective below and hit subscribe for